It looks like we have 4 members, so that's a quorum. So with that, I'll call the March 26, 2024 meeting to order at 5:30, well, 5:29 according to that clock. Can we start with a roll call?
Siddall.
Here.
Burnick.
Here.
There you are. Okay.
Nice.
McCullough.
I am here.
Straightburger.
Here.
Cratch.
Mm-hmm.
Case. Ramirez.
All right. Did everybody have a chance to look over the minutes?
Move to approve. Second.
Terry, did you get to see him on their email?
I saw him, yep.
Cool. We have a motion to move. Do we have a second?
I second that.
Motion is second. All in favor to approve the minutes?
Aye.
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 Opposed? No opposed. Minutes approved. All right, so it looks like our first business item is 4A, update on street funding. I don't know who's leading that.
That's going to be me. And then I've attended previous meetings, but I don't think I've ever met you. So I'm Stacy Del Castro. I work in the Public Works Department. My position is. Nice to meet you. So a caveat, I have just a short update. I don't even think I could take the full 10 minutes even if I tried. I'm filling in for Rob Emmons, who is an engineering manager with our department. He's on spring break this week with his kids. But what this update was supposed to be, so in January, Public Works Director Chris Bailey, she provided a presentation on pavement funding. This was the same presentation that was provided to council, fourth in a series of the presentations that we've been coming to council and the commission to try to identify funding in order to improve the condition of Albany's pavement or street pavement. So this particular discussion in January, I think Chris covered, our Director Bailey covered that council didn't provide specific direction, but they asked staff to do more work to look into 2 funding mechanisms, a fuel tax and a transportation utility fee. So we have done some work on that, and this is what this report is. So let's see, I have some notes that I need to follow. So Rob contacted what's called the ODOT Fuels Tax Group. This is a group that administers, they collect and distribute fuel tax in Oregon. They were able to provide us with the fuel cell information for every gas station, truck stop, fuel distributor with an Albany address. So we have good information on a fuel tax. We did have to make some assumptions with the numbers because this list of information includes some stations that have an Albany address, but they would not be included in a fuel tax district. For example, the Millersburg truck stop would not be included in that Albany fuel tax. The gas stations, Highway 34 and I-5 didn't. And so what we did is we made an assumption that these particular stations would make up 40% of the sales that ODOT provided. So with that, a 1 cent fuel tax for Albany based on ODOT's numbers were from $378,000 to $420,000. And we do think that these are good numbers. They align pretty closely with the city of Springfield, which is similar to Albany in population and proximity to I-5. So Springfield, we know this last year collected about $1 million in gas tax revenue. So that's just something to consider. We're not moving forward with that information, but that's what we're looking at. And when we do develop our public outreach plan, it's the information that I could share with the public. The other thing, the transportation utility fee is much more complex and difficult to estimate good numbers. There's a consultant that we're going to be working with, Deb Gallardi. She has a long history working with Albany. She helped develop the stormwater utility fee. She helps with all the systems development charges. And what she shared with us is that the most fair and accurate way to determine and implement a transportation utility fee is you link it to the demand that a property is placing on the street system. So Costco, if we had a moving out burger, they would get charged more than like an accounting office because based on trips. And so that's what we would be looking into. So there's a International Transportation Engineers Manual. It's called the ITE Manual. I don't know if you've ever discussed that. But the ITE Manual, it provides a basis for estimating demand on the street network based on development type. And so that would be used with information that luckily the city already has in our GIS. We have zoning information as well as building size. It's a big process to undertake because you have the ITE manual, you have the GIS information, but then you also have to put boots on the ground, go vet the information and make sure that what we're seeing in GIS is actually what's taking place in the system. So we're really early in that process. I don't have any numbers to share with you today, but we are going to be executing a contract with the consultant to start that process. At the same time, we are starting to develop our public outreach plan, but part of that is we want good numbers that we have already vetted with this commission and council before we go talk with the public. One thing we did talk about is possibly doing some surveys just to get that sort of input before we have the actual numbers. That's really all I have.
Can you go over those numbers one more time? It's 300 and what?
Okay, so for the information that ODOT gave us, a 1 cent gas tax would be $378,000 to $420,000 annually. Most cities have like a 1 cent up to a 3 cent gas tax. Portland has 10 cents. But we would probably be looking at the 1 to 3 cent range. How many tax, or is it so a fuel tax has to go to a vote, and it depends on how the ballot's set up. Portland has to, their tax, I believe, gets renewed every 5 years. I would think we would want to just go once and not have to go multiple times if that's what's pursued. It was interesting. I don't know if anybody ever listened back to the council meeting. There were like 2 councilors that strongly supported looking into a gas tax, 2 that strongly supported the transportation utility fee, but then yet some like the hybrid approach. So,
and that was in January, that council meeting?
January 22nd, I believe. And so thus we are looking at multiple options, which is more work on our part, but it's a thing to be looking into.
The Millersburg in the 34 I-5, where aren't those locations going to be considered? Since, it's a huge jump, 40%. So why aren't those locations?
I believe it's because they're outside of the urban growth boundary. It's interesting because it's Millersburg, but it still has an Albany address, and so that's how ODOT collects it. But what they shared with Rob Emmons is that those areas would be outside of Albany's boundary.
Do you look at the others?
It could, Rob maybe has that in his notes, but no. I don't think we have it broken down into diesel versus gasoline, but it's all of the above. But they, I mean, they actually have been good to work for as far as the food agency.
Based off the slides we've seen in the past, that seems to me like it barely make a dent in what we would need.
Yeah, we're looking at a $12.8 million gap, but I mean, just having a place to start somewhere.
The utility, the transportation utility, is all based on like the businesses on that's just business related.
Most
fees.
of the transportation utility fees in Oregon are based on the category, like what the property is, the business or a single family residence versus just a flat fee.
So we can assume there'll be a residential fee, multifamily fee, small commercial, large commercial, industrial.
Yes. And that's what this consultant that we're going to be working with will help set up different fee structures that, I mean, we could also probably come and talk with this commission and go over. I know a lot of times it's going to be tied to like how is this property impacting the street system. So those that are generating lots and lots of trips like a Costco are going to have more impact versus just a single family or
How can we get money back from the public?
well, it seems like that would be a high use. Yeah.
But if they buy their gas in no bird, we zero out.
Rob was saying that taking 40% off, he felt was pretty conservative, so I think that number's bigger. But yeah, you're right, people can choose to go purchase their gas.
But for a penny, or 1%, no one's gonna drive 6 miles.
Most people don't. Yeah, sorry I don't have better information on the transportation utility, but it's gonna be a much bigger effort to.
Do you foresee it being more, giving us more money in the end than the 378 to 400?
Likely, yes.
I'll be curious to see that.
Well, but it depends on how it's set
Broke
up.
down, yeah. It'll take time, but it'll be interesting to see that.
What about,
Go ahead.
what about the city utility fee? So we're looking at, we'll just say 400,000 for the gas tax. What do you expect to get out of the utility fee?
That's gonna have to be, I guess, what council will, I guess they'll receive input from this commission and then they have to weigh what they think the community is able to.
Okay, well, different question then. So we already pay a fee for
Stormwater or
well, it goes to the general fund, right? So what are we getting out of that?
None of the city utility fee goes towards street maintenance.
Right, but what's that? Do you know what that number is? What the overall, how much that brings in?
It may be in one of these presentations, but I don't have.
And so to piggyback, no, so this fee that possibly, that will be directly towards street fund.
That's the benefit of having just a transportation specific utility fee versus increasing the city utility fee. I mean, because that can always change, right? So yeah, it would. And the other thing we talked about is like this is going to be part of the public outreach is like in regards to local streets. We need to make sure that we have a top 20 local streets that are determined with a defined criteria. It's going to include the pavement condition index, but there's going to be other factors as well. Like is it?
So I know there is a list
Yep.
of that.
We have that list, but then there's so many roads. We're going to want to develop probably additional criteria to help make the decision. Because like a 0 compared to a 20, we both are in horrible shape. So it's like, what street do you select? And so some of the criteria maybe are there other, city infrastructure that needs to be replaced in conjunction, like there's water, sewer, and storm, so it's timely. Or maybe this road is adjacent to another street improvement project. It may be near a school. We'll have to look into all of that as well.
Well, that's, you publish a list, and then there's somebody builds a subdivision, and all these streets get fixed. And people raise their hand and say, wait a minute, you promised me that my street was gonna be done 17, and now you're moving me down to. I think Chris said also that it would be at least 2 years before we went to ballot, because we have to indoctrinate or whatever the term is. People.
I mean, using the stormwater utility fee as an example, there was about a year's time that we spent with public outreach.
It's still there, because it's not a tax, it's a fee, so you can just do it tomorrow at the council.
If this council was so inclined.
But here's my good, and I go right back to where Chuck was going. All these sound great, but the time frame. So the tax, I understand from conversations we've had about this, that it's never passed. And so the public outreach and the being in the ballot, it's gonna take a couple of years, which will put our streets further and further in that hole. The fee, what sounds like, is something if the city council said, yes, we're gonna do that, even with a little bit of outreach, but that's gonna happen. It's not an option, we're gonna do this because X, Y, and Z. That seems like it's a shorter time frame.
It could be, yeah.
So why would we go with the shorter time frame that's probably gonna, in what I'm hearing, possibly give us more revenue than the tax? Why wouldn't we put most, not all, but most of those in the basket towards that and push that like crazy?
Oh, good.
Well, go ahead. See? Oh,
I thought you were.
Close as mine.
I think that at its core is probably a political decision. If the council is seriously interested in a gas tax, that goes to a vote.
correct.
If you go to a vote for a gas tax, and a year before that, you then implemented just by council ordinance, transportation fee, the odds of the gas tax passing might be low.
Gotcha.
So I think council's gonna have to weigh those exact things, like, do we wanna go for both of these things? Do we wanna focus on one? If we're gonna go for both, what should the timing be? Those are the decisions that they're struggling with, and as Stacy described, and as Chris found out, there's a difference of opinion on council, a wide disparity of opinion about exactly how to approach this.
In the past, so when we're looking at the gas tax, the reason, I don't know, obviously, I don't know the reasons that it failed or how close it was to passing. Was it lack of just community, the outreach, or was it just not just knowledge, or just the voters were just like, it's not gonna happen? Do we know?
There was very little public outreach, so that was one of our suspicions, is that one of the reasons why, but it may not have been the only reason.
Okay.
Was that time built for transportation, or was it?
It was, council just decided to put a gas tax on the ballot.
So
Very little public outreach, and they put it on the
what were
ballot.
they gonna use it for?
Gas taxes is limited to, going spending on roads and public right.
Oh,
So they couldn't spend it on the library or police or something.
That's my concern, is that the general fund that used to help the roads slowly but surely got taken away. And so my idea is that whatever we're gonna put to the council, that is literally just gonna go to our streets. It's not in 10 years, well, okay, let's just pull some of that from the streets and put it over here. Yeah, and then we get back into the problem we have right now in the conversations. Like, what are we doing here?
And down the road.
Correct, and that's hard to kick in the can.
Are you talking about a whole brand new fee or increasing the fee? Because this fee was something that the voters didn't decide, was implemented. You can do with whatever that money you want to be, right? Can you
I think
already utilize some of that money and say, shift things, add to it?
it would be a brand new fee, and
Well, we're on the water bill.
most likely, it would appear on the water bill, and it would be, I mean, even with the city services fee, I think that the resolution or ordinance that approved it, they defined what the fee was gonna be used for, and then maybe even, included like percentages for the different departments, and I imagine they would do that with this, utility fee. Could they ever change it? Council. Yeah.
That's my
So with
frustration.
the
right
gas
there.
tax, you can't see it.
That's what we're all.
And so that's, and
A
again, that's,
year later, they get 2%. So
Correct.
later, it's 5%.
That's
Been there, done that.
That's the thing that just blows my mind legally, but I guess that's what lawyers are for, but.
Terry, you said it a few months ago, if I don't even see my street on this list, why would I vote to support this?
Yeah, do you have anything to add, Terry? You're muted.
Jerry, you're muted.
It's really, really hard to hear the whole conversation. It comes across pretty stilted. I really still feel it strongly that we need to fund, whatever gives us the most revenue, to correct this problem. And if it means, biting a bullet and saying we should try to get some kind of a gas tax, I think we should do it.
You've been exceedingly quiet.
I was thinking,
Oh, that's what that noise.
there are an increasing number of people who use electric cars tax-free. My first thoughts were, electric cars domiciled at an Albany address should be taxed at a rate consistent with equivalent rates to that of a petroleum-powered car.
Good.
The fee would be metered at a rate of cents per kilowatt hour.
For mileage,
Hard to meter.
But here's
Cents per kilowatt hour
How
are
does that work?
in electric
Yeah.
bill,
That's the
and they're
elephant.
paid automatically.
well,
I
but
agree with you though.
So now we're talking about a power
I
tax?
understand, but in the city of Albany, do we have that many electric cars where it's gonna generate that amount of revenue?
Down the line, I think we'll get there.
Correct, or the
Not now.
infrastructure to support that.
Or,
I see the electric cars around, but I just don't see it, like, if we had a population like Portland, that would kind of make sense to me, like, okay. And we're seeing an influx of electric car in Albany, it just doesn't seem that way.
Seems like there'd be more in Corvallis, a city that's more green than we are. There is.
or the
If we
ability
try
to
the idea and it works well, I think other cities will follow.
I believe so.
Well, the dilemma here, and ODOT is facing the same dilemma with the statewide level with the gas tax funding the state system. And they've been looking at ways, looking down the road, the gas tax, when you establish it, it's a certain number of cents per gallon, it doesn't change. And as the electric vehicles move up in terms of percentage of the fleet, as the fuel economy of the gas-powered fleet gets better, the amount of money you collect per mile drops, right? So it's always the gas tax is always going to be decreasing. So ODOT is having to look ahead to how do we start collecting from electric vehicles. And Mark's idea and concept is a good one until you try to figure out how to get the money. So for instance, in the gas tax, we're relying on the fuel providers to collect the fee, it to be funneled through the state, and then the state gives us the money. There is no such system set up that we could take advantage of individual meters for the power company for electrical service. And so I think what we may ultimately be able to look at a way to tax electric vehicles and that fleet, it's going to be piggybacked onto whatever ODOT comes up with for the state system. We're not going to be able to come up with one all by our lonesome.
And they're leaning toward GPS in every vehicle.
They're leaning towards anything they think that will eventually work, and I don't think they've settled on one yet. But when they settle on one, that's where I would expect the local jurisdictions to try and piggyback on. Something equivalent to a gas tax.
That makes sense.
We see your comment, Daniel, thank you. Thank you for your
Well,
comment.
is that recorded, or do I need to read those, or how does that work?
The comments that the
Very nice.
Oh, it's Daniel, what did you say?
Yeah.
I'm
assuming that they show up on the video, but I guess I don't know.
I think they'll show up on the video.
No, let's practice it.
All right, anybody else have anything else to add to that, or negative, nothing?
to be
4B.
readdressed, please.
Oh, yeah, that.
Oh, yeah, this will be a reoccurring topic, I'm sure.
That's one of my, yeah.
Albany Municipal Airport.
Yeah, it's me.
It's you, all right.
I'm Rob Romeo, and I'm the airport manager here, and,
I thought you were streets.
well, yeah, I am streets,
I thought you were street manager.
transportation manager, sorry. So I do streets, the airport, a lot of different things involved with that. The airport, is a wonderful place. I think we've got some good things happening out there. Andrew just asked me to talk here, and I'm not real sure specifically what you guys want to hear, but I can talk a little bit. I've got the history of the airport, or, kind of, we've got some projects coming up that we're working on. We can talk a little bit about all of it. So Albany Airport was started in 1929. It was moved. It used to be over where Kohl's was and Panera Bread, hence Airport Road there. They moved the hangar.
That makes
There's
sense. Never put that together.
Yeah, there's a 1929 hangar out there. It's on the historic registry.
Where's it at?
That was in,
It's the round one.
yeah, it's the bigger, I think, what?
It's the
It's this
dome.
big dome.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So it's pretty cool inside, and we're turning that into a museum, which we're pretty excited about. We'd like to get more people involved at the airport for the community. We've got an FBO out there, Tony Hahn, does some great things with Infinite Air Center. He's teaching a lot of flights, training pilots and getting people certified. So we'd like to get a lot of the kids around Albany involved, get them out to the museum. Debbie Orger has been wonderful and instrumental in getting this to happen. And she's basically, once we get it established, she's gonna hold classes for kids to come out. I know she's got a class coming out here pretty quick from the Combe to kind of show them the historic hangar, and they're gonna build model airplanes to get them interested in flight. We had somebody come out and do a presentation, and they had this really light aircraft that they made, and they put it with rubber band on it, and basically it turned, they flew it, and it just really slow, and it was just really cool. Just made a circle, and they banked it so it just make right turns and just kept going around. And it's pretty neat. Inside the hangar. So I think these are classes they'll have where the public can come out and watch this. They're interested, they can get their kids involved with that. But the Albany Airport is, we're kind of limited on what we can do out there. We've got a short runway. We're just over 3,000 feet. We've tried to get a displaced threshold to expand it, to get bigger planes to come in, but it's just, we got a lot of limitations on it. The runway safe zone would have to extend, and there's just a lot more involved to get a displaced threshold, to expand that runway, to get bigger jets in, and if that happens, you can probably get like a UPS or FedEx possibly to come in, but we get a lot of no's from the FAA because there's a lot of air traffic around Eugene, Salem, Corvallis, and then you throw Albany in the mix, and it just becomes kind of limited on what you can do with a lot of that. But we're supported by land leases we have out there. There's 16 land leases, 11 T hangars. We've got 3 city buildings out there, plus the FBO. They offer fuel services, so a lot of hobbyists come in and fuel up, and it's pretty busy out there in the summertime. So we got a lot of Tony students just getting time, getting certified out there. Some of the projects we have going on this year, we've got 2 of them going on. We're going to re-roof the historic hangar and then the FBO building. with the BIL funding for grants. BIL, the bipartisan infrastructure law, and then
Federal or state?
that's federal. And then we've got another project, we're gonna install taxiway lighting for safety, which will be nice. We obviously have the runway lights, and have VASIs that are gonna get replaced and upgraded with PAPIs. So it's instrumentation that's safer and more consistent. Then we're gonna rehabilitate and do a fog seal and restripe the taxiway. So that's a $2.2 million project. Sounds expensive, but we only pay $20,000 out of pocket for that. So we get federal grants, via FAA, and then we can apply for core grants. Let me tell you the headache. Federal government, state government, applying for all those grants, working with them, getting everything coordinated. That's the process of, that's kind of what we're shooting for now. We've got some other projects coming up. Next year, some of the open T hangars, we're going to redo the building or try to make some upgrades to it with BIL money again. And then probably in the future, we've got, we're going to crack seal and fog seal and redo the pavement markings on the runway in 26. And then we're going to redo the fueling station within, make it into a helicopter pad potentially. So some of the future projects we have, but it's just, we're struggling some of our expenditures are not keeping up with the revenue. So you guys probably heard that in the news coming up that, there is a shortfall. Quarter of my wage comes into play. We've got shortfall. Another thing that doesn't help is stormwater fees that we have to pay on the runway. Those are pretty expensive. So a lot of space out there for.
So the airport's not contributing to the general fund?
No, not necessarily.
Where's the shortfall at? To the city, the state, or?
City.
Oh.
Yeah. So it's just the revenue is just, we don't make enough, and it's just, we're trying to work with economic development to get something to the airport, like a casino or something. Just kidding.
Like, talk about lack of space, like, whoa.
Well, yeah, well, if we can get, we're trying to get hangars built out there and trying to get people to come in, and yeah, it's just kind of a hard.
So your museum, is that pretty much donation?
Yeah, it's
mostly.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically not going to be funded. It's just, we're trying to draw more citizens.
To get funding for future use.
Yep, economic development can probably give us more money for the TLC committee if we can get people out there to justify economic development there.
I can talk a little bit about that if you're interested, because I'm the board of directors on the Albany Regional Museum, who's partnering with them. And they're trying to save that hangar because if you've been in there, it's pretty dilapidated.
Yes.
I mean, it's
We've had a tenant in there for the last 22 years.
You have or have not?
We have.
Okay.
And they didn't do it any justice.
right. So the goal for them is to save it. And because it has a lot of history in Oregon. It's one of the first, if not the first hangars in the state of Oregon.
The first,
On the west coast?
Yeah, and Evelyn Burleson flew out of there, and she's part of the 99s. She was in the same club as Amelia Earhart, and she lived there for 4 or 5 years or something. So there's a lot of really neat history.
Taught a lot of pilots there, and a lot of the students from Oregon State came over, and she actually made a nonstop flight from British Columbia down to Tijuana.
Right, that's what made her famous.
Yeah.
And that was in that same era as
October 41.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a cool hangar. It has a lot of history and there's a lot of potential. And I think the group that's running it has a pretty cool vision.
Yeah.
So
that's the Albany Airport. And
What makes up the revenue sources that help fund the airport?
yeah, we've
Where's it
got
come from?
the hangars. We basically charge per square foot on all the hangars. It's a land lease that we charge. And then we get fuel sale. We get 8 cents a gallon from Tony at the FBO building. So
So when somebody builds a hangar, they lease the land from us, and that revenue helps operate the airport.
yeah. Yep.
Although in truth, it's a very insignificant amount of money. maybe 3,000 a year.
For the revenue that the airport is bringing in?
Yeah, not off the top of my head.
You can ballpark.
Well, yeah, I think it's probably,
The big one, the big long ones are about 3,600 a year.
yeah.
And there's 11?
Revenue to the city. They, the owner of the hangar, leased them for about a little less than 300 a month, so they're making 30,000 a month.
Not necessarily. I mean, it's their cost to build them. They probably have to put forward too.
Oh, yeah. The loan they're paying.
So if it's still losing money, are these projects that you have, they sound kind of neat, and I like history, but I also like to see revenue. You know, I'm a businessman, I run a bank, I love history, but I love money a little bit more. I just do. And so if the revenue is just not catching up with what we're doing, ultimately what's gonna happen? Because
We're about 2 years from that point.
so where the revenue is generating enough where it makes perfect sense.
Right.
Okay.
But in 2 years, we're gonna hit that head on and say, we need to do something.
It's hard when you can't expand anymore. Yeah.
Yep. But, you know, and I don't know, it's a difficult situation to be in. And, you know, I think the council, we took this to council 20 years ago and they said, okay, we're not making money here. Let's give it 20 years, see where we're at. That was 2020. We're kind of gonna come back to council and see what we want to do.
I mean, people may not like this, and I'm one, but if it's not making money, and I get the history behind it, I love that, but and maybe there's a portion that can be set aside for it, but if it's not making money, costing more, how long do you? It's like.
Are you talking about the hangar?
The airport in general, if it's not making money for the city.
Can you do the historical hangar, like museum thing, and then not have a running airport?
I think they're hoping
That will,
that museum will bring in a lot of pilots and a lot of people for events. They're planning events. They had one last year. Do you know how many people it brought in? It was like a 2-day event. I think
Yeah,
it brought in like 600 people or something.
I remember that. Yeah.
Here's, I go big picture, 600 people, that's fantastic, that's great, that's 600 people.
You were so negative.
Well, and I'm trying not to be, I'm just realistic, but that's not gonna generate enough revenue to keep.
But there could be economic development.
Correct, and I like the idea of trying to expand it, getting like a FedEx being able to drop off, or UPS, that's huge. That's a game changer, that's
Impossible, probably not gonna happen.
and when we look at that saying, hey, that's probably not gonna happen because we can't do X, Y, and Z, we can't do this and this, ultimately, and I'll be the one to say it, we have to close the airport, we have to look at a different option for that space.
That costs money too.
I already know, I know.
Well, there's things that other airports are doing that this one isn't, from what I understand from the meetings that I've been in, right? Like landing fees and stuff. We don't have any of those. So
It sounds like the hangars are not very expensive either. Is it 3,600? Is that reasonable? That seems,
It's a little below state average, but it's
average.
not bad.
So you're not gonna be able to increase price on that.
The
Like the landing
the
phase.
big boom is,
And those are options to consider, to look at.
is there a fuel tax out there for the airplanes as well?
in effect, because there's a pass-through fee,
There is,
HBO tips the city.
Oh, right, that's right. There's,
we have an 8-cent tax, or an 8-cent fee for the FBO up there.
Other cities, I like the landing fee, I kind of, I mean, if other jurisdictions are doing that in their airports.
I don't know how they're doing it. Is somebody gonna sit out there and calculate it? They have to pay them.
Do you
And I
have like a staff
imagine
out there? Do you have a staff out there like throughout the
Just
day?
me a quarter of the time.
are these conversations that come up in the airport commission?
What's that?
Are these topics that come up in the airport commission?
Yep.
So how they feel about landing fees and higher gas taxes?
Just our last meeting is when we first discussed the shortage. I think it's kind of where we're headed. Figure out what it's gonna take.
How much is it short?
It'll be $90,000 a year
So
Just
in the
where that's
city's
going.
idea, that, or in the city's, that's not huge when it comes to a city, right?
Right, and it's just, if we can get more economic development leads out there, we can figure out if the museum is gonna draw more people there, or somehow we can figure out, to get a restaurant or something, or, more hangers and make it appealing to.
Frank is all over the ideas.
Well, no, because again,
Did
Yeah,
the
yeah.
airport?
I like money.
Business guy.
Yes, it was sold to the,
So that should be enough to.
and I think that really was that money.
No, but go ahead, say that again?
The hotels and the expo center, that used to be city, the airport property, that was sold, and I think that's where a lot of the money came from.
We had a reserve of several hundred, like 500,000 10 years ago. And it's been,
That makes sense.
So we'll ask it over. Good
But
point.
those bring in tourists, right?
Correct. And so okay, now, yeah, get clicking. Got some ideas. Got some ideas. Well, once you start thinking like, okay, what can generate revenue? 90,000, that's not a lot. That can be made up in a year. Just gotta figure out the right aspect to do it. I mean, just like I said, a restaurant on an airport, or right there, actually might not be bad with that museum right there and having like an airport maybe. I know some people. Okay, I know some people.
It's interesting because there's so many hands in this pot. Because we have this commission, airport commission. You can even bring in the Parks and Rec and expand Art and Air Festival.
Yeah.
Expand that for an air
that'd be
show
cool.
or something.
Yeah.
Kim's gonna kill me for saying that. She's listening.
Do the
That's a great idea.
do the hangar leases still have a clause where they go like 20 years and then the city decides whether we re-up or take them back?
25 years, and then they've got
Is that-
5-year
Way,
extensions.
way back when it was, well, we're gonna charge a really low rate
To get you there.
to let the people build the hangars, and you operate it for 25 years, and then it reverts to the city, and then we're not getting 3 cents a foot, we're releasing the hangars, it becomes city hangars if we want to. That's very unpopular, I suspect, with pilots, with people that built the hangars.
reverse
But that's the way the leases are
There
written.
you go.
But
So that's one of the things council's gonna have to figure out, is if you're short of money, or do you want those hangars or not?
So
you got enough, all that
I'm
staff.
just saying,
Well, no, if the revenue is going to make up the difference, the little bit of money put into it to get it to where it needs to be, but if we're hitting 300,000, okay, we have to spend that little extra to get there, that shouldn't be a problem. Like that, I look at the bigger picture, like, okay, expanding Art and Air Festival.
That's
with
a great idea.
Like, there's ideas, like, okay, I got you. I want this.
Chuck, you're on the airport commission. How long have you been on
I
that?
don't want to get you guys on a,
No,
different
different
tangent here. These are our issues that we're going to be seeing in the future, and as we're preparing, to go to council and talk, and come up with ideas of how we're going to support the airport.
Okay.
So,
So you've been on that commission for 12 years. Do you have anything to add to that?
The saving grace is a double-edged sword. At the end of this 30 years, the city has the legal option to take over those hangars. There'll be lawsuits and arguments, and you can't do this to us by the good old boys that run the airport. But the city needs to stand its ground, otherwise we lose.
or their option is, I think they could sell it to us, or they could tear it down and take
Yeah.
it away. So,
They,
and I bet that's probably what would happen. I'm not giving this to the city. I don't know that,
yeah.
but
Just go ahead.
just thought.
Okay. All right.
Well, I'm excited for your museum.
What's that?
I'm excited for your museum.
Thank you. I think
Yeah.
it's going to be a great thing for the airport.
I'm good. I like that.
Well, thank you guys for letting me present and tell you a little bit about the airport.
Anything from that side of the table or online? No?
Yeah, I had a question. This is Lacey. Sorry, let me put my video on. Hi, I had heard of this idea before that this project was going on, so I'm really excited about it. And I just wanted to know, like, how can people stay updated on the progress, or if they want to help or volunteer or anything like that?
What project?
The museum.
The museum. You probably reach out to Debbie Horger,
Or Keith Losey.
or Keith Losey, who's the Albany Regional Museum Director.
The hangar is getting a website and it will be online. If it's not now, it will be shortly, and we can bring that to the next meeting.
That
Or
would be
email
great.
it.
Lisa, you can email me and I can get you the contacts as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, are we good on that topic? Business from the commission?
But it's just.
Are you not here? You're here, but not here? You running this? Okay. Business from the public? We have a letter. Oh, do I need to read that, or is that included in the public?
It's a communication that came to the commission from the public, so you don't need to read it. It will be attached to the minutes and will be available for anybody to see. It dealt primarily with transit, and we attempted to get a representative from our transit department here today so he could help address this. He was out. Now not available to make it. We're hopeful he'll make it. If not the next meeting, maybe the one after. Because it's probably so. We'll have Barry Hoffman show up and probably speak to these in more detail than we can.
Yeah, that was a little while ago. That was in response to the tax.
No, there's one down. See, it says red.
Oh.
Do you have this? Do you have those?
I can't see that far. It's pretty readable.
It says it's also important to remember that government projects don't always need to be and shouldn't always be profitable. Losses for the public are good at some necessary.
That's what I'm saying.
Whether it's
I
necessary.
agree, Daniel. I agree.
Here's the question.
It's tough to make that point, but sometimes it's just for the better of the community that things are here. That's just my thought, but I understand the business part of it too. Someone still has to pay for it in the end. So in the end, I get it. So I get the heart that he's feeling, but you still have to pay for it in the end. So I get it. I get both sides.
So Ron, you're saying this is a topic that's going to be addressed in the coming months?
It's a topic I don't think I would recommend you take up tonight because Barry's not here.
Right.
It's a great.
Okay.
So I think it'd be easier to talk about the transit system and the ins and outs of it and why the routes go here and not there, and whether or not there's a potential at some point to have like designated transit lanes, which is one of the topics that was raised here. I'd like to have Barry here to help talk about that. As the operator of the system and whether or not, how much of that he thinks is feasible.
So Daniel, if you can hear me, stay tuned. You might want to check online and see what the agendas are looking like.
I think it's gonna be May.
In May, maybe we can address your letter better.
Roger that, yeah. That makes sense.
Thank you for the letter.
No, of course, yeah.
All right. That's business from the public. Nobody else is online. Oh,
Nolan,
Mark.
may I introduce something? As follows, we must perform triage on all of our city streets, collectors, and arterials by filling potholes. Following that, there are not many of them, but the ones that are there are noticeable. Following this, we should repave the most egregious of city streets which perform the role of collectors and arterials. I'm thinking of 3rd Avenue. I don't have a horse in the race there. I don't live there. But it occurs to me every time I drive down that street that I need to be careful of potholes. And potholes are a pretty economical repair.
That's a summer thing, right?
No, we do it year round.
Oh, you do?
They
Yeah,
do,
we get-
I've seen
A lot of it, I mean, if they're big, we don't just drive, I mean, I've got guys out doing different things and, you know, you gotta look at how many guys I have, you know? 8 guys for the whole city, and I've got one guy sweeping, and then I've got one guy that does 22 traffic signals and 8,000 signs. You know, one guy calls it sick, and I've got, you know, we're busy. And we get complaints on, oh, there's, you know, a tree down over here, or, we do get a lot of pothole complaints, and we pretty much go out and fill the potholes once we get the complaint, as soon as we can. We're pretty fast, I think. Some of these streets, they're falling apart faster than others. Third is fourth.
And I feel like if you just keep
Fourth,
filling potholes on Third, like it just gets worse at this point. Like the whole thing needs to be repaid
It
because
does,
we're just patching and it's making it rougher.
yeah.
Yeah.
There's
Third is
a
awful.
possibility of like grading it to where it becomes smooth gravel.
I would love to have a milling machine, a grinder where I could go in and grind a 12-foot path in
Yeah.
each section.
There you go.
We're looking at $250,000, so
Maybe you could rent one.
possibly. I mean, there are sections we could do, and that might be a possibility.
Wonder how we get that funded.
Once we get funding.
Break your
and
back.
I- you
Less
know,
than the gas tax.
yeah.
The grant, you haven't applied for any grants lately.
2 of them.
That was me.
We're doing, my guys do great work, and they're out there filling the biggest ones first so we get right away. It's just,
Do you
So,
guys,
and did they email the city for those, or did they?
a lot of email, call in.
Okay.
do you guys do like parking lots too, or is it just, like, you know, remember there was a big one at the Windkill parking lot?
That's private property.
I wondered if that was or not. Okay, that's what I thought.
So maybe just reiterate for the public who might be listening, how would somebody report a pothole? The proper
In
way.
the parking lot at Windkill?
No, on the
I
street.
thought it was private.
Poles.
It took them a while, but they got to it.
City property.
Yes.
You can call the city phone number, you could call here at City Hall or operations. You can go on the city webpage.
I think there's actually like a link for it. Yeah.
Yep, and just fill it out and let us know where it's at. We'll get guys out there to fill holes.
They do an amazing job.
They do.
What they have.
Yes, you do. You do. Yeah, got it.
Thank you.
All right, does anybody have anything else? Anybody from online? Terry
There's
or?
a gap here. I was curious. I recently got a mailer about a
Can you say
project
speak?
that. Sorry? This is Daniel Koenig. Sorry. Hey, yeah. So I got a mailer recently about a project that Benton County is doing with the sort of the multi-use pathway expanding in North Albany. Are there any plans to extend that into Lynn County at all?
I don't even know about that.
Kind of.
How do you like that?
Good answer.
So there's a piece of that path already built in Corvallis. There are pieces of the path that link Albany and Corvallis that were recently built by ODOT with some of the work they did along Highway 20, near Independence and Granger. That happened because Benton County was coordinating with ODOT when ODOT was designing that highway project. The county has a couple of times come up with different alignments for the area, for instance, between Granger and North Albany. And there was an earlier alignment that they had funding for that they ran into problems with, opposition from property owners. They ended up abandoning that one. They went through a different design process to try and select a different route. And they're still in the process of trying to decide if they're going to go forward with that or not. The mailer you got was for the piece of the path that's inside Albany's city limits and urban growth boundary. That's a project that ODOT's doing for the county. So the county applied for it and ODOT's delivering. And even the route of that project got cut back a little bit. But the long-range plan is to have a path that goes all the way from Albany to Corvallis, generally paralleling Highway 20, although it might not always along the highway. But we haven't, or Benton County hasn't figured out a way yet to nail down the precise alignment. So they're still working on it. They haven't given up on it, but that's the goal, is the path all the way between the two communities.
So is the idea once Benton County gets their path lined up, we'll sort of connect to them at that point?
It would happen incrementally as funding shows up. So there, it's a big enough project that it'd be unlikely to get funding to do the whole thing.
Right.
So they're like, for instance, as I mentioned, they had funding to do a big piece of it, and then the alignment kind of got blown up by neighborhood opposition, and so the funding went away, or that piece would have been there. So it's as the funding shows up, which is generally some version of a grant.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you for the information.
Ron, when we, 3 to 5 years from now, when we restripe First and Lion, and we put a left turn lane on Ellsworth onto Second, will that then lead to better bicycling through that zone?
Slightly. There'll be a slight improvement at the intersection of First and Lion. Or at the moment, if you're on First, you're approaching Lion, the bike lane almost disappears. I mean, I think there was a stripe there at one point, but it's been obliterated by right turning vehicles.
But they want to move it to the south side.
Ultimately.
Yeah.
But in the project that ODOT's looking at, where you get dual right turn lanes from First on to Lion, there will be a more defined bike route there, and there'll be a bike phase to the signal to get bikes across the intersection. So that intersection will work better. Although I don't think that with that project, we will, for instance, switch the bike lane to the south side of First. That I think will be the long-term option. And that will provide much better
Safety.
well, not just safety, but efficiency, because it eliminates that conflict at Lion where you have dual right turn lanes conflicting with the through bike movement. And so if the bike is on the south side, that conflict goes away. And so not only is it safer because we remove the conflict, but it improves the efficiency of the intersection. Those right turning vehicles don't have to stop and wait for bikes to go by. And so the efficiency gets better. We can't jump to that right away because it would mean restriping First Avenue all the way back to Main Street and flipping the location of the bike lane. And that means redoing all the curb returns. So it just kind of, it turns into a big nasty project. So we'll be approaching it incrementally. But yes, this initial ODOT project will make it better, but not as good as it will ultimately.
Got it.
Probably not even.
All right. With that, we good? We'll adjourn the meeting at 6:28.